I wanted to see if we could get some windscreens on the microphones here. But failing that, if you could just lower your microphone, Mr. Galloway, so that you don't speak right into it. Great. 10 minutes, George Galloway.
Crazed fabrications. Johns Hopkins University and The Lancet, the Journal of the British Medical Association,
check it out,
are engaged in crazed fabrications.
Politicized fabrications.
Isn't that, no, crazed fabrications, you said.
Both.
Isn't crazed, well, is there anybody really in this hall who believes that
really? We don't know what you're supposed to believe yet.
You think that the academics from one of the world's finest universities in your own country are crazed fabricators? You think that the Lancet, the Journal of the British Medical Association, are crazed fabricators? I mean, how far has this neocon rot seeped into your souls? How far?
Get it.
Now, I'm going to have to deal with this hypocrite Hitchens. He talks about the death of soldiers in an occupation army at the hands of those resisting them. He supported the Algerian resistance in its bitter battle against French occupation, which cost 1 million lives. And he supported the FLN, who conducted the most bitter, unremitting, unrelenting military struggle, which would today be described, and was then by the French described, as terrorist. And when Ahmed Ben Bella, the leader of the Algerian Revolution, was asked why he was placing bombs in baby carriages and leaving them in the souk to explode amongst the French forces and their collaborators, he answered, if the French will give us some of their helicopters, some of their aeroplanes, we will give them our baby carriages. Isn't that the same situation today? That Mr. Hitchens' friends are the ones with all the tomahawks, all the Apaches. Isn't it odd that they should choose as the names of their weapons the totems of the Native American population that they remorselessly massacred in centuries gone by? The Iraqi people have only themselves with which to fight this foreign occupation. This hypocrite crying tears for the American army in Iraq supported the struggle of the Vietnamese people from the first to the last, as they killed 58,000 American soldiers in Vietnam. He opposed the American war in Vietnam and supported those fighting against it. Today, he supports the American occupation of Iraq and seeks to slander those fighting against it. Now, there are Al-Qaeda elements in Iraq. Whose fault is that? Who brought them there? How did they end up in Iraq? There were no Al-Qaeda in Iraq before Bush and Blair attacked it. And now every Islamist in the world is either on his way or dreaming of being on his way, descending like spores of anthrax on the gaping wounds in Iraq created by your war. And I'll tell you what, they'll then spill around the world, spreading their jihad exactly as his new, or rather old, friends in Afghanistan did. The Arab Afghans who were sent by the American administration to Afghanistan in the 1980s became Al-Qaeda in the 1990s and into the 21st century. So, Mr. Hitchens' policy has succeeded in making 10,000 new bin Ladens. He and his friends
Sorry about that.
have deepened,
I didn't mean to do it.
have deepened the swamp
Really didn't mean
of
to do
hatred out of which these Islamist fundamentalists are climbing. You see, well, somebody laughs. You may think that those aeroplanes in this city on 9/11 came out of a clear blue sky. I believe they emerged out of a swamp of hatred created by us. I believe
Please.
I believe
Be quiet.
that by their unending, bottomless, and total support for General Sharon's crimes against the Palestinian people, the United States, I don't think your new friends are quite as keen on the Palestinians as you once were, Christopher. I believe that by propping up the puppet presidents and the corrupt kings who rule the Muslim world almost without exception from one end to the other, Western policy has created this swamp of hatred against us. And it won't matter. It won't matter how many fly swats we invest in, how many Patriot Acts we pass, how many anti-terrorist measures we pass. If you live beside a swamp, no amount of fly swats will protect you from the monsters who will come out of that swamp. We have to drain that swamp by stopping that support for Sharon's Israel, his apartheid wall, his crimes against the Palestinian people. We have to stop. You see, I tell you, there's not many supporters of the Palestinians in your ranks tonight, Mr. Hitchens. I think unless we stop propping up these dictators in the Muslim world, none of whom would last 5 minutes if it were not for the military, political and financial support of countries like yours and mine, unless we stop invading and occupying Arab and Muslim countries, then we will be forced to endure the atrocities that took place in New York on 9/11 and in London on 7/7 over and over again. So if I can't reach your heart, let me at least reach your head in your own interests.
Try the wallet.
In America's own interests. Reverse your policy towards Israel and Palestine. Reverse your policy towards dictators in the Muslim world. Reverse your policy towards war and occupation. And we can all be safer.
Christopher Hitchens, 5 minutes.
Oh, I had no idea. That was the appeal to the cerebellum, that last bit, was it? Well, okay, you'll forgive me for pausing. I was waiting for the next shoe to drop. Now, I'm beginning to find myself a little overwhelmed by Mr. Galloway's compliments. I don't know where he keeps coming up with them from. It's true he did once say of me that I was the greatest living English man of letters and polemicist, and I was grateful. I could have wished it wasn't published in a newspaper nostalgic for the rule of Brezhnev, but you take your compliments where you can, and I might add that, if anything, ignited the hatred and violence that has come to preoccupy us in the Muslim world. I think the invasion by the Soviet Union of the entire territory of Afghanistan, its virtual annexation as a country, and the certifiable and provable massacre of many tens of thousands of Afghans, as well as the insult to their religion, is probably a better candidate than the holding of a free election in Iraq as a provocation. But you see, there will always be bloody fools who think, yes, of course, now you look at the situation in Gaza, it makes perfect sense to commandeer a plane load of civilians and smash it into a building full of civilians. Why hadn't I thought of that before? I think you may have noticed, Mr. Galloway, that you picked the wrong city to say that in. And arguably the wrong month as well, because some of us are still mourning. Some of us are still mourning. Please. Some of us are still mourning, among other things, the very large number of Americans of all faiths, including very many Arabs and Muslims, who were killed in that disgusting atrocity. And when you say, if we don't mend our ways, this will happen to us again, if you weren't an ally of Saddam Hussein and Bashar al-Assad, if you had not been an ally of the preachers of hatred and subversion in the region, how dare you say the United States supports the Assad regime in Syria? You say that I have no brief for the Bush administration in this, but it seems to me bizarre that someone should say, fresh from the podium with Bashar al-Assad, that the United States supports all the dictators in the region. What is this? We have, in concert, for once I must say, with the French, succeeded in gaining some part of the recovery of the autonomy of Lebanon, which was under a most corrupt and brutal and illegal Syrian occupation. And the leader of the Lebanon Socialist Party, whose father was murdered by Assad, and the leader of the Lebanese Communist Party, whose father was murdered last month by this Assad, and all others hailed it as a liberation. And you say it's like the French taking over Algeria. This is piffle, sinister piffle. The French claim in Algeria was that Algeria was part of France, Algérie française. We do not say Iraq américain, Iraq anglais. We don't, let alone Écossais, which it might be if the certain numbers of... no, I shall block that metaphor, excuse me. I came very close there. It's also, I think, a bit much to be told that these Al-Qaeda chaps, these killers and sadists and nihilists and producers of indiscriminate explosions, wouldn't be this way if we weren't so mean to them. Now, it's true some of them, Mr. Zarqawi, their leader, of course, the bin Ladenist leader, was in Iraq before, and was well known to have been in Iraq under the rule of Saddam Hussein, and I can tell you that no one gets in and out of Iraq at that level without the president knowing. And it's also true that a group affiliated with him, the Ansar al-Islam, a fundamentalist group, thought that its main job was to kill the Kurdish leadership in northern Iraq, the elected leadership, which is a strange target, I think, for a holy war. And it's also true that some of them came to Iraq after we threw them out of Afghanistan. Well, that's easy then. Leave them in control of Afghanistan. Don't mess around with these people. Don't make them angry. Don't make them mean. It's your fault. Now, this is masochism, but it's being offered to you by sadists. Okay? And someone who hasn't answered my question, my challenge. I said in round terms when I opened that this is not just a matter of which of us can be the rudest, because I already conceded that to Mr. Galloway. Or which of us can be the most cerebral, because he's already conceded that to me. But I said that there's a further grudge between us, which is this. I say that Mr. Galloway discussed the allocation of oil for food profits that stole directly from the Iraqi people and that helped to corrupt the scheme and program of the United Nations. I say he discussed that personally with Mr. Tariq Aziz in Baghdad, at least once. And if he will put his name to an affidavit that formally denies that, we can have done with this business. But if he does not, it's going to haunt him on every stop of this tour, and all the way back to England, and everywhere he goes to raise the flag of jihad in the Middle East. This I promise you. I promise you.
George Galloway, 5 minutes.
Bring me the affidavit, I'll sign it now.
Very
It's
good.
a complete lie. It's a lie like the other lies on your leaflets that you were handing out like an idiot on the street before this meeting. It's a lie. Buy my book. If you don't want to buy it, go to the website of respectcoalition.org and read it. I've already dealt with this. It's a lie. Nobody ever discussed oil allocations with me. Not Tariq Aziz, not anybody. I've already said it under oath, never mind an affidavit,
No, you've not.
under oath on pain of imprisonment in front of the US Senate.
Won't
That
ask.
smokescreen will not wash. You want me to run through the dictatorships you're supporting? Do you want me to
Yes,
run?
sure. Yeah.
Yes?
Why not?
Well, that is masochism. That really is masochism. You
Well,
want me to run through the
Yes,
dictatorship
get-
in Saudi
get-
Arabia?
Yes, get on with it. No.
Do you want me to deal with the dictatorship
No.
in Saudi Arabia, the prison state? Do you want me to run through the family business more Corleone than Sainsbury's that runs Kuwait? Do you want me to run through the dictatorship in Egypt? He has the gall to claim the election in Egypt as a fruit of the massacre of hundreds of thousands of people in Iraq. Hosni Mubarak got more votes in the so-called free election last week than he got in the election he admitted he rigged 6 years previously. And you want to call that democracy? You talk about democracy in Lebanon, your Cedar Revolution. It wasn't democracy they were demanding in the square of the Cedar Revolution. If there was democracy in Lebanon, Sheikh Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah, would be the president of Lebanon. But he can't be.
Very interesting.
He can't be the president of Lebanon.
Very
No Muslim can be the president of Lebanon. You've got to be a Christian to be the president of Lebanon, even though only 20% of the population of Lebanon are Christians. And how did that come about? Because the United States Marines waded ashore in Beirut in 1958 to impose that constitution on the people of Lebanon. You have the gall to talk about dictatorship and democracy, Mr. Hitchens. You have the gall to talk about corruption in the Middle East. Your president and his father are complicit to the tune of millions and millions of pounds in the corruption of the Arabian Gulf, in Saudi Arabia, with the Carlyle Group, with secret Saudi investment in the failed business enterprises of George W. Bush. And you, a former Trotskyist, wrote in the newspapers that you were backing the re-election of George W. Bush, Dick Cheney, Donald Rumsfeld, and the rest of this gang. You should be ashamed of yourself, but you're not.
But I'm not.
But you're not.
But I'm not.
But you're not ashamed of yourself at all. It's true, I praised you. You were a butterfly. You're now a slug. You did right like an angel, but you're now working for the devil. And damn you and all your works.
Well, that concludes the first part of this debate. Now it'll be a little more freewheeling. I ask you not to speak over each other, but you can go back and forth more. I'd like you each to think of a question you'd like to ask the other. But I'd like to start by asking Christopher Hitchens. You began today by talking about the evils of Saddam Hussein. That, though, was not the main argument of President Bush in invading Iraq. It was weapons of mass destruction and links to al-Qaeda. would you say that he engaged in a systematic campaign to deceive the American people and the world?
To your first point, you see, it used to be said, oh, well, Bush only, in the first Gulf War, Bush Sr., he only cared about the removal of Saddam Hussein from Kuwait. He didn't care about the Iraqi people or the Kurds. He only pretended to. And the UN resolutions only allowed him to do Kuwait, and fair enough. But so whatever you do, you're going to be accused of not giving out your full agenda. So I don't feel myself particularly wrung by that point. In his address to the United Nations, in fact, the first address on the subject, the President did mention a full menu, as you might say, of indictment against Iraq, which included, or I should say, rather the Ba'athist dictatorship, which included its record of genocide, its proven record of deception about weapons of mass destruction, its links with terrorism, and its violation of all the UN resolutions governing these things. I have written that I think both Mr. Blair and Mr. Bush insulted not just their own electorates, but everyone in the world, by preferring to, shall we say, frighten people, preferring to frighten them than to educate or enlighten them. And I've written that repeatedly, and I believe it very much. I think a good cause has been gravely disfigured by that, by those political deformities. But if you will allow me to say so, Amy, just as I am not personally responsible for creating 100,000 Al-Qaeda fighters, nor am I here as someone who can answer questions on behalf of the Bush administration, rather to the contrary. It's a single-issue question with me. I think that the President was right to do what the previous President and Vice President, Mr. Clinton and Mr. Gore, had only promised to do, and what the United States Senate had only voted to do, which was to move Iraq into the post-Saddam Hussein era. All that was decided and repeatedly promised by the preceding administration and by the US Senate when George Bush was still a provincial governor of Texas. So I don't think this is a subject that can be changed just by saying Dick Cheney and knowing that there are enough morons who will always boo when you say that. But you see, I've become a touch alarmed in the last moments or so. I'm not certain that the plain meaning of words as uttered by me is being understood by the audience, because if they understood me to say that I favored the royal family of Saudi Arabia at any point, I apologize. I'm sure I didn't say that. And I don't think anything I said could be construed to mean it. When I said I supported Syed ad-Din Ibrahim, the moral leader of the Egyptian opposition who was in Mubarak's jail, I don't believe I gave an endorsement of Mr. Mubarak. But Mr. Galloway appears to think that anything will do here, and beneath each gutter, there's another gutter gurgling away underneath. But I would rather to debate this question on its, so to say, merits and demerits. Now, just on this point of weaponry. If you have, as you do have in the case of Saddam Hussein's Iraq, a regime that has used chemical and biological weapons against some of its own inhabitants in Khorasan, against Iran, several times, that has run an elaborate method of concealment that offered Mr. Tariq Aziz, Mr. Galloway's best friend, I think he told the Senate, Senate subcommittee, I think he said best friend or very close friend, man he's met 12 times, spent Christmas with. Mr. Tariq Aziz has offered, and I have an affidavit on this, and we will get one from Mr. Galloway too, and put the two together. The UN Chief Inspector for Iraq was offered $2 million in Tariq Aziz's office face-to-face to change his inspections. We know that dummy sites were run up for UN fools to inspect, and we know that material was buried and moved, and we know that scientists were terrorized and told that their families would be lavishly killed if they cooperated with any inspection. On this knowledge, of which I'm sorry to say I am the prisoner, I cannot not know this, any more than I can not know that Saddam was trying to buy weapons off the shelf from North Korea. On the basis of this establishable, provable knowledge, who is going to say, well, let's give Saddam Hussein the benefit of the doubt if he says he's not fooling around with weapons now? What responsible leader of any democracy could face his people later if that bet turned out to be wrong? And say, well, I had every reason to think he was on the level. Come on, get real, be serious on this.
And your response to Colin Powell saying that his UN speech was a stain on his record? Your response to Colin Powell saying that his UN speech, making the case of weapons of mass destruction, was a stain on his record? Just a minute response, if you would.
I don't give a damn what Colin Powell thinks about anything. I never have, and I never will. I think I've noticed that having been for a long time the most overrated public figure in the United States, he's running for the nomination to most overrated man in the world, but I don't really care. And you can't make me.
George Galloway, Saddam Hussein currently sits in jail. Do you think he has committed any crimes, and if so, what?
Saddam Hussein committed real and serious crimes against the people of Iraq. Most of them in the 1980s, when he was the closest friend of the United States and Great Britain. He invaded Iran at the behest of the United States and Britain in a war which killed 1 million people on either side. A war in which chemical and biological weapons were used by both sides, sold to both sides by countries like Britain, America, and West Germany. He killed, massacred Kurdish people in Halabja. I was one of those who demonstrated against it. Mr. Tony Blair, nor any of his cabinet, participated in any of those demonstrations. Because then, the Ba'athist regime in Iraq, against whom I was resolutely and actively involved, were the best friends and customers of the then allies, United States and the United Kingdom. Saddam created a killing field in Iraq. Like all dictatorships, one of the Goebbelian tricks that Hitchens has performed this evening with his little leaflet is to try to give you the impression that in my book, I'm not the only one. I come out in favor of Saddam Hussein. In fact, I denounce him in the most withering terms. But you wouldn't get that from the leaflet that Hitchens has given out this evening. So, not only do I think that Saddam Hussein committed real and serious crimes against the Iraqi people, I said so at the time he was committing them. I was denounced for saying so at the time he was committing them as a communist troublemaker, disrupting the profitable relations between Iraq and Britain.
Amy, I'm sorry, I have to. I know we're supposed to take it in order, but I think you would think less of me, ladies and gentlemen, if I had no reply to that.
Well, I'll reply to you then.
See what, by all means, let's see how this goes. Mr. Galloway claims that at a certain period in the 1980s he was supporting Iraqi Democrats and protesting against Saddam Hussein, knowing what he was capable of, knowing what he had done, knowing the genocide, for example, committed in Kurdistan, and knowing of the aggressions and the chemical weaponry that had been deployed in Iran. He says he knows that. I've had the opportunity to check with the woman Anne Clwyd, just very distinguished member of the Labour left in the British Parliament, who was the chairman of the relevant organisation, the Campaign for the Restoration of Democratic Rights in Iraq. She says she has no memory of Mr. Galloway's participation, but let's say that we take his word for it. It means that when he went, having said that he thought that Kuwait was part of the Iraqi motherland, to greet Saddam Hussein in 1994 in Iraq and to salute him for his courage and his indefatigability.
You're lying again. Your nose is growing.
He went and to take his side again, it meant that he went on his own evidence. He went in full knowledge of the fact that he was dealing with a murderer and a monster and a dictator. So the pit of exculpation that you attempt to dig, Mr. Galloway, has just swallowed you up, and the record will show it.
Yeah. But
George Galloway.
But you opposed the war in 1991 in the full knowledge of what had happened at Halabja just 3 years before. You're the one who went on television denouncing President Bush for his plan to invade and destroy the regime of Saddam Hussein. You are the one who did it. I saw you with my own eyes.
Yes, I was there too.
I saw your lips moving.
I was there too.
I saw the words tumble out.
Yeah.
Keep your wig on, you told Heston. Name 4 countries around the country of Iraq that you're so keen to attack. You were in completely full knowledge, even better knowledge, because it was even fresher in 1991, the nature of the Saddam regime. But you were against the invasion of Iraq in 1991, presumably because you calculated that a tin-pot dictatorship in one country in the Arab world was one thing. Unleashing the right of big superpowers to invade and occupy other people's countries without legal authority, without judicial permission of the authorities, political and legal, in the world, was an even bigger danger. Even bigger danger. I was a small fry in 1991. Nobody in America was watching me on television as I was watching you on television in America and cheering you for your foresightedness, for your wisdom, for your subtlety in knowing that sometimes in life you have to choose between bad and badder. Sometimes in life you have to choose between evil and more evil. That's what you did in 1991. The only difference between us is that on the road somewhere, Damascus,
I would say, yeah.
I don't know where.
Be careful.
I don't know what it was, whether it was Vanity Fair or whether it was the lucrative contracts that you've landed since, but somehow you decided in 2003, maybe it was the whiskey, somehow you decided in 2003 to take a line that was the complete opposite of the line you used to take. Now you want us to gloss over that point.
No, not at all.
You say, well, yes, you did. You said, I can't understand why so much time was devoted to this point. Were you lying then in 91, or are you lying now?
Please.
Were you wrong in 91, or are you wrong now? If you were wrong in 91, how should we believe you're right now in 2005? If you're capable of such drastic, dramatic, erratic swings from being in favor of a devastating war, to being against a devastating war, to being in favor of the liberation struggle in Algeria and Vietnam and Ireland, but against the liberation struggle now in Palestine and Iraq. If you're capable of such dramatic, almost, if I can use the word that you used earlier, crazed shifts of opinion, how can anybody take you seriously?
Well,